opportunities, building high caliber teams, and demonstrating keen understanding of the customer. His Silicon Valley based startups were founded by the likes of Intel Capital and Philips. His most recent venture, Cupola Technology, an IoT engineering company, was acquired by the Happiest Minds in May 2017. On the technology fronts, Sir Ajay is experienced in building strategies and world class products and solutions for emerging areas such as AI, data analytics, IoT, video and networking. He has also managed large cross functional teams for successful delivery of global award winning products. Now, I request Ajay sir to start with the session.
Thank you, Pawan, for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure being here, especially with Nagpur, which is where I am actually born and brought up from. So I hope that you guys are able to see the presentation.
Yes, sir, it is
Is
visible.
the presentation visible?
Yes, sir.
Sure. So I think I just looked at the agenda and figured out that today the main focus of the discussion will be around startups and entrepreneurship. And as I was pondering about this discussion, I thought it might be a right way to look at connecting with young minds, who are far more curious and far more apt and enabled, compared to what I was 25 years back when, in my college days. And that's where I'm looking at this as connect with young minds at Triple IT Nagpur. Uh, and again, thanks for inviting me. I think it's always a pleasure to come, discuss, and learn, with you folks. Now, before I start, I would like to tell you that let it be an interactive session. You can interrupt me any point in time, where you think you can add value to what I'm saying, or if there's any clarifications or inputs that you have, and let it be a discussion which actually is more immersive and interactive than a one-way flow, from a presentation perspective. Second is, I think all questions are important, all doubts are important, and I will try my best to see, how I can address based on my experience and what I have seen and what I see around, around today. I think we live in exciting world, but I would want to start this discussion by the quote from Paul Cohen, and what it actually means is that while we can learn and basically judge about everyone else, finally it boils down to the ownership in terms of trying to own our own actions and decisions. I think that is predominantly the most important aspect when you look at not look at entrepreneurships or startup, the ability to own your own decisions, the ability to sculpt your own future. And I think that is something that really appeals to me. Uh, Now, in terms of the discussion today, the way I have organized that is basically I want to go back into what I have done in my past, especially with the startups. I'll give a backdrop of what those startups were, and again, you have to go back in time to look at the ecosystem and the kind of business challenges that we were trying to solve at that point in time. Then I'll come back to the learnings that I've had, in terms of what is the recipe that at least I want to propagate in terms of my experiences with startup, and then nothing basically can substitute, in terms of looking at a few areas, and I can go to pretty much multiple domains, but I've picked couple of domains or verticals where I have just highlighted some of the opportunities that are there, and then look at the trends in terms of technologies, and what's happening and what the expectations are and how the world is going to move and adopt technology, especially in the area of IoT, AI, and and data. And then finally, I will touch down with trying to look at opportunities based on the discussions that we have had, and then why I believe that this is the age where we got to live in terms of entrepreneurships and startup. So, without much ado, let me get into what my journey has been. I have actually no hesitation in saying that the kind of knowledge, the kind of footing that you folks have is far superior than what I have had. I basically did my all my early days have been in Nagpur. Then I got into Bits Pilani and had a easy life where got a job, a year ahead of me passing out from the college, and that's where I basically came into Bangalore. This was, again, a very important point that you got to realize is basically this is my journey, and it is always has a context. It has a context of time. It has a context of the maturity of technology and the maturity in terms of business adopting technology. Okay. Now, before I go into this journey, you got to look at how your journey is going to propagate in the next decade, 2 decades, or 3 decades, or whatever your active career life would be. And will it be something where drones will play an important role in terms of how things are delivered today? Will it be like metaverse, coming to fore, where you'll have you and your avatars attending multiple engagements at the same time? Or it could be the like of you basically having an incarnation of your own, trying to do multiple things and having your buddy which will tell you whom to meet, how to meet, what to speak, what not to speak, what to dress and things like that. So effectively the world from here to the last next few decades is something that you will have to look at, in terms of the opportunity landscape, in terms of the focus and what business will pick up. And obviously there are multiple challenges, but more importantly there are tons and tons of opportunities there. So my early career started with Tata Elxsi, a fantastic company. I joined as one of the early employees, and since the IT industry in itself was in infancy, I got to work with I got to work with some cool activities. Like I worked with NASA to solve one of the critical problems for that. I worked with Hitachi in Japan to sort of build a product for them, which was among the most advanced product at that point in time. And one thing led to another, where I thought about, who are the ones who are actually making the decisions in terms of which product to, invest in, and and how to intercept the market. And that led me to sort of joining a pre-funded startup in 99. This was a Silicon Valley based startup based in California, Santa Clara. And unlike today, where we take pride in terms of joining a lot of business centers, I joined this pre-funded company with a business center, out in Bangalore, and among one of the very early employees, as part of this team. And this was the era where the email had just started to crop in, and email was basically confined to large institutes. It was confined to large organizations, and it still had not percolated within within homes. And the founders of this company, were basically veterans coming out from AT&T, Bell, and C Cube, which went IPO. And they basically wanted to build a platform which could actually enable broadband at home, and hence the journey started. This was again an era where cloud was not there. We were still trying to look at serial interface to pump in as much data as possible, and the networking both at home and office was still not relevant. And what effectively happened was we built a quad core processor at that point in time, and which could actually take data coming in from any of the Ethernet interface. And then as we moved forward, the wireless interface, wireless specs started to mature, and that also became one of the LAN interfaces. And on the WAN side, we had the likes of frame relay, ATM, ADSL, which became a telco standard and things like that. And this was a company where we built up grounds up not only the chipset, but we also built the entire platform, including different protocols. And the most important aspect was when the company started in a through midway, it was all proprietary software that had to be built. I was instrumental in building an IP stack, which was an Express IP stack, which was on a OS-less system, and taking care of all different nuances in terms of security, firewalls, VPN, and the likes of that. Uh, Midway, basically Linux came into picture, and Linux started to basically take prominence, and we basically went ahead and adopted Linux as an open source tool onto this platform. And one thing led to another. We were one of the go-to platforms in terms of enabling companies with the likes of Cisco, Alcatel, who were basically, producing the CPEs, for themselves based on the platform or based on the hardware that we had, hardware as well as the platform that we had built. So I stayed in the company. The company was one of the most marveled company in the valley at that point in time, and I still believe it was the most challenging work that I have ever done in my life. Unfortunately, in 2003, there was a dot-com burst, and a lot of good startups went under the under the dust. And this company also had to go through its own turbulences. And since I had got the startup experience, I started liking that. I effectively went ahead and co-founded a company called Verismo Networks. This was in the 2003 time frame. Every home started to have a network and an internet, so to speak. But what we figured out, as we co-founded the company with a team in Bangalore as well as in the Silicon Valley, was that the next big change, in terms of the traffic that will come on the network is going to be video. And with that ethos, we started this company. And the initial stage was more trying to figure out what business proposition, what is it that the customer would like. And in this era, Microsoft was trying to convert a PC into a TV, a smart TV, and all the consumer electronics company were trying to convert the dumb TV into a smart TV. And what you see as smart TV or what you see as OTT today, and which you are very, very conversant with, is a product that we started with in 2003 time frame. And again, it may look early, but we are very sure that that the most of the content that's going to come on the network is actually going to be in terms of media files like audio, video, and photos. And we started with personalizing or democratizing the personal media, where irrespective of the images, videos, and music that you have, you could actually watch them on TV. We can watch them on the laptop in a more aggregated and seamless manner. We went into the OTT world, where we made all the content available directly to your TV, where we had a set-top box and a cloud framework and a mobile environment to be able to actually connect and control your TV. We got into IPTV, and we basically got funded by Intel Capital, and we also got acquired by them, later in the journey. Uh, Now again, we can call ahead of the time, but I think we had hit and identified the right business problem. We had identified the right change in the technology landscape that was going to happen, and we were massively successful with our deployments in 100 plus countries, and a huge amount of revenue that it was driving as well. Now, by 2010, after the funding, I basically started to look at the next set of challenge for me. And what came out basically is to sort of look at ideas around the connected ecosystem. And that connected ecosystem eventually evolved into IoT. But in 2011, I started a company called Cupola Technology. Now, unlike my previous venture, this was completely based out of Bangalore, India, and it was completely funded between me and my partner. So I'll get into slight more details around this, but if you folks have any clarifications or questions, please shoot it around this context. Nothing? Okay. So this in brief is journey of Cupola. I think the reason I decided to put in this journey is because in your context as a startup, you will have to go with certain decisions that you take, certain known challenges that you will have, and certain parameters which will demonstrate progress to you. So in 2011, when I decided to start Cupola, the idea was very simple, that we see that devices are becoming more and more powerful, and they are getting connected to cloud, more than they were earlier. Mobile is basically something which has started to be ubiquitously used, not only by the personal but also by organizations, in terms of the HMI, the configurations, and other things that are there. And also the cloud, cloud was there to stay. There was support in terms of managed services from the likes of Amazon, Azure, and it was very easy to sort of manage a cloud infrastructure. So with that in mind, we basically started, Cupola, and we basically started to hunt for ideas where we could actually build a connected ecosystem. We landed with the first customer, after a lot of rigor, where there was one of the large uh, paint company called ExxonMobil, and they basically had a very different idea. They basically believed that lot of the paint and repair workshops, which works out of this continent, especially, in Asia, they are not optimally managed. And because they are not optimally managed, the consumption of paint, is not as high as it should be. And effectively, what they wanted to do is to basically give an enhanced customer experience, to their workshops, so that they can manage their customers and their work very, very efficiently, and that's where we basically built a complete, we conceptualize a product which will allow a workshop to sort of, take the car, estimate the kind of work that is required from a paint and repair perspective, the kind of different stages that it goes through. And this was a co-owned product that we, built with them, and we basically deployed it across multiple workshops, in this part of the world. Now, as we progressed, we basically also got into an industrial IoT customer, in the US, where we started to conceptualize and build the complete end-to-end, IoT for hazardous industry, more for the chemical and the petrochemical kind of business, which had to be an on-premise and a high asset, need. And this is a very, very early stage and a very, very nascent stage from a IoT perspective. But we got that, and we started to basically develop tools and technologies, around that. Now, it is also important to understand that while I estimated that the company, will be able to make an impact and will have n number of customers, I got at the end of 1 year, I got zero customers from the list that I had, and I had few surprises, where I didn't think that I will get business, but I got businesses or initiatives from there. And more importantly, the funding aspect of it. The kind of investment that I did and the kind of burn rate that I thought I was completely off. My inflow was half X and my outflow was 2Y of what I thought. And what it actually meant is, towards the end of 2011, I was in a situation where either I had to shut shop, or within the next few months, I had to basically get, drive revenue to a much, much higher, higher rate. And fortunately, we were confident, and we were able to drive and get the revenue, at a much much higher pedestal. So the learning there was, as much as you want to calculate, as much as you want to sort of do the math on the Excel sheet, finally, when the rubber meets the ground, it's a very, very different environment all to as we speak. We got into multiple engagements, right from looking at a provisioning platform for on a non-telco ISP, and then basically we looked at that as one of the provisioning platform from our perspective, which became an important element from the IoT perspective. And as we grew, year on year, we basically started to uh, acquire more businesses towards IoT. We started to own the complete product and concept, and we started to get recognized, and by 2015, we moved from a 50-seater office where we basically wanted to have more capacity, and we added another 50-seater capacity so that, we could actually sort of take care of our growth, and we hit around 100 odd people by 2016-17. And more importantly, what you see is as you go year on year, the base and the foundation that you have built in terms of the team, in terms of the understanding of the market, in terms of our capability, in terms of the decisions that we took in terms of looking at only open source technology, when we look at the connected ecosystem, and the interception of market, needing something like IoT, in the 2010 decade, that all started to work. And in 2016, we started to not only hit a good revenue, but we also started to sign multiple customers, in a record time. So this would actually mean that one of the Hong Kong-based company, which actually wanted to use camera as a as a network and a compute hub, we actually could use our IntelliGate and IntelliCloud platform, where we could actually enable a edge intelligence on the camera, where you could connect multiple different sensors with these, and you could have a cloud platform to sort of manage that, and obviously mobile platform to enable and experience that. We built a fog computing platform, again, a edge computing platform for one of the startups which were actually looking at uh, enabling the ATMs, so that lot of theft and lot of real-time intelligence can be driven at the edge. We basically looked at a product where Coke basically started to use that sensor with the beverage cooler, so that you could know the inventory, you could know the amount of usage that happens on the beverage cooler, as well as the energy consumptions and stuff like that. And one thing led to another. 2016 2017 was a time frame where we were supremely confident about the company, our ability to sort of have an impact. And when we did a comparison, again, lot of other startups in the IoT space, we stood out as one of the leading companies in the IoT, and that started to get recognition within the within the industry, and we had marquee customers, both abroad as well as in India, whom we were whom we were sort of engaged with. And what happened, this is the time where I wanted to move away from the organic growth to sort of take the next bet and get into get into inorganic growth. And what that meant was, I needed money to be able to multiply my company, with offices in US, Europe, the ability to basically propel the products that we have built in terms of the edge product as well as the cloud product, in terms of building different functions. We had a sales function, but it was run by a couple of guys, basically to invest in sales across the organization, invest in marketing, and invest in basically building the team. And I started to sort of, talk to VCs and talk to a lot of, people who would be interested in investing in the company. And one thing led to another, and we finally got acquired by Happiest Minds, in May of 2017. And though our intent was not to get acquired to raise money, but that is something that worked out for both the parties, because Happiest Minds wanted to have a foray into IoT space, and they were ready to give the independence that we as a company needed. And for us, it was a good home in terms of the kind of access that we had to the market and the kind of backing we had in terms of the growth and the expansion plan that we had. Any questions or any clarifications on this, folks? Okay, so now let me look at the kind of learnings that I've had. I think all of us want to be successful. All of us want to sort of see how all my initiatives are basically successful, and at the same point, what do I say? I get the maximum ROI of whatever I do, and what I figured out is the most important attribute for you is your attitude, and this attitude is, the ability to say that I can do it. And if you go back in the history, you go back to look at all the successful people, I think this is one attribute that stands out, And the other important thing in which I firmly believe is like a warrior, once you believe and once you sort of, have a belief system and you want to do certain things, you have to shut the door and just go after that. Too much of thinking, too much of doubting, is obviously going to fail. What basically happens according to me is that, our mind is like a thermostat. The day you start thinking that I'm going to fail, you'll have the support systems around you to sort of, make you fail. At the same time, if you believe that you are going to succeed, then you'll have all the positivity and all the all the successes and ecosystem around you for you to success. One of the examples which I would want to give there is, uh, to me, Leonardo da Vinci was one of the greatest human being that I have seen in the world. He was an architect, scientist, painter, a scholar, educationist, you name it, any quality that you want to have, he had all that. And to me, I always thought that, he could do anything and everything around. And there's a story which I read, and that basically really was, profound to me, is that he was the one who drew something like an aeroplane and said, and basically said, this is what I'm going to design, and this is actually going to fly. Come as it may be, he spoke to some of his trusted advisors and friends, and then they basically convinced him that this is something that's not possible. And I think that led him to doubt it, and that led him not to try it. And that is something that effectively, I thought that he could have been the one who could have actually forayed into this that area much before the Wright brothers came and did what they did. Uh, Similarly, I think a lot of times we basically think too much and we don't try it out. And one of the most important reasons for not achieving success is to not to try. You look at a mountain and say, can you sort of climb the mountain, and just looking at the hurdles, just looking at the amount of challenges that you may face, you don't try it, and in the process you don't learn some of the lessons that you may learn by trying it. At 95% of the times, just because you have not tried something, you are not achieving success. The other thing is, when you try, you never know how far you are from a success. You may be 99% there, you may be 95% there, you may be 80% there, you never know. So keep trying, keep trying, keep innovating, keep keeping basically the what do you call, keep modulating depending on the environment and the requirements that are there. I think that's an essential part of what defines, what success you have. The other important aspect is, there's something called a failure disease. You always think that my health won't support it, my I'm too young to do that. I think that young phenomena at least has gone away with the kind of successes that we see in this, with the unicorns and things like that. But there are things where you say you're too old to be, doing certain things. You look at intelligence, you look at, the famous case between Henry Ford and, Chicago Herald, where they said, you are not educated, then how can you run an organization? And he won the case by saying, I will surround myself with people who can execute and get that done. So you can look at a lot of excuses that will actually sort of make you fail. But if you have the attitude and if you believe in something, whatever the thing is, you'll find out a way to come out of that. I think, and that has been my learnings. And what I effectively do is, at any point in time, if I have to start a new initiative, I give enough time to sort of think, deliberate, discuss. And once I have identified that this is the problem to be solved, then it's like a warrior who shuts the door at the back, and you have to just go forward and win the battle from there on. And obviously, there's no guarantee that everything that you do will be a success, but the kind of learnings that you have as part of the experience that you go through, is also a humongous amount of value that that gets added to you. Now, some of the inspirations and examples I will take here, just to sort of defend my point. This is Dr. He's called as Dr. V, Dr. Visionary. He's basically a guy called Govindappa Venkata Swami, and he was the HOD for Madurai High Hospital. And if you look at his young age, he was handicapped and he had issues with arthritis. He could take heavy medical field, like surgeries and stuff like that. And he decided to actually dedicate to ophthalmology, and basically started doing that. And he did fantastically well in terms of surgeries. And while he was at the Madurai Hospital, he conducted a lot of camps in the vicinity, in the rural areas, to help the poor people, with the cataract and other surgeries that were required, and they were very very common in this part of the world. Now, one thing led to another. He was, as he retired from this hospital, he decided to sort of, accelerate his ability to help poor people, and he started to set up large camps, in the vicinity, where basically he wanted to make sure that the operations are done at minimal cost or no cost, and it could impact a lot of people around. He got the inspiration from the likes of Coca-Colas and McDonald's, and say if they can have a factory model where the products can be come out, in such a high speed, why can't the same thing be replicated, with his initiatives? And what he started to do is, as part of his camps, he designed he designed all the operation theater, a makeshift operation theater, such that there were multiple beds adjacent to each other, and most of the heavy lifting was done by the nurses. And the nurses were again coming from the rural background, and they were trained and paid and fed well. The doctors basically came only for the necessary time that was required, and they could move from one patient to another. And that, in fact, basically, brought down the whole cost of surgery that was required, and also the kind of efficiency that got in. And this is a guy who sort of, bet his complete livelihood, his complete savings, to make this as a mission, to the extent that his Keen and Keith had to come and sort of support him and became a part of this momentum. I think Arvind Eye Hospital is a known entity, but it couldn't have been happening without this visionary. And the fact that he started late in his career, after 58, 50, or around 60 years, is when he started to look at this initiative. And as he basically progressed further, he figured out that this intraocular lenses are the most expensive part when you are actually doing this this surgery. And what happened was, knowing that as basically a challenge, he went and set up a factory to sort of generate that lenses. And as of today, I think every third or fourth lens is actually coming out of that factory, and they have tremendously helped bring down the cost of this surgery and the kind of impact it has had across India. So the point I'm trying to say is, a lot of artificial, barriers that we put for ourselves. There are, huge number of inspirations around you. Some of them may be successful, some of them may be visible, but a lot of them may not be there. Look around and you'll have enough of those sort of helping out. The other example that comes to mind and which I get inspired is basically from the gentleman called Soichiro Honda, and he's the one who's the founder of Honda, which is such a large conglomerate, and something he's a pioneer. And if you look back at his history, his father was basically a bicycle repair person. He basically sort of was helping him out. Then he moved out to Tokyo, and then he sort of had a penchant to sort of build what looks like a motorcycle today. And he actually built a piston which basically powered his bicycle, and he used to demonstrate that because that's the vehicle he was using. And at some point in time, he got a huge success with Toyota, sort of ordering and giving him an order to supply pistons for their vehicles, and that was a huge one. And as it had to happen, the World War, basically happened around the same time. The city that he belonged to got bombed. His factories couldn't take off. Now he left all his expertise to sort of focus on how to learn construction and build a factory. And because of that, he was able to actually produce what he produced and what he invented as we go along. So. Uh, Effectively, he firmly believed that for his future was in his own hands, and any challenges that comes through, he will be able to circumvent and do that. And there are a lot of examples in this part of the world where we see and where we look at that. Now, if from this learnings, I want to change track to more on the technology side, and and basically look at the current landscape in terms of what is available, what is not available, and how do we leverage technology as we go along. Now, before I do that, any clarifications or questions you folks have? Okay, so I think as described here, effectively you got to look at the context. You got to look at how things how things move ahead whenever you take an initiative. I think we all think about being looking at sort of defining what you are going to achieve as the end state. But if you look back at the at some of the Indian startups, for example, Flipkart started to look at selling books, and then basically they expanded their vision to sort of be the last mile operators for any need that that house may have. You look at the likes of Intel, which actually started with developing memory chips, and when Japanese competition came into picture and they dropped down the price, they were actually sort of forced to look at other markets, and then they started to look at the calculator chip, and one thing led to another, and finally they found their mojo with the chipset that that came from a PC market perspective. And then when the cloud happens, the server market is what they what they captured. Now, any organization, any startup that you look at, it is actually will have to go through this go through these changes or modulations as you speak. And it is very, very important that we look at sort of adjusting to that. So what I want to do is I want to just look at couple of examples. And again, these are illustrative examples. You can go back and look at different industries. You look at health tech, you look at the use of technology that's happening around, health tech, right from patient care to hospital management, to the kind of, geriatric as well as old age care that's happening around that. You look at edutech, where the whole education system is changing, the kind of information and the kind of advent of AR, VR, and things like that. You basically look at legal tech. You look at any area around us. I think all of them basically have, n number of opportunities for you to sort of look at. So what I did, I'm just basically uh, highlighting some of them. So, for example, if you look at smart cities, I think from a from a nation building perspective, I think this is a very very important aspect. And though we have been speaking about smart cities, the implementation always has been challenged, but with more and more technology coming to play, you see a huge amount of potential here. So right from managing all the different resources that you have, your water, waste, energy, basically, which is a smart grid. The ability to intersect, have technology manage that, ability to do that efficiently, give more, more power to humans so that they can do much more than, what they could do. And lot of these things like water, waste, or smart grid, basically have three different, aspects to look at. One is obviously the generation part of it. The second part is more on the transmission part of it, and the last part is on the consumption part of it. So if you look at from an energy perspective, the grid is basically the transmission part of it. The generation part is basically, there, as well as the consumption part is in terms of utilities and the meters that you use. Now, the ability to automate that, the ability to detect leakages around that, the ability to smartly, forecast the demand, the ability to smartly monetize and optimize the operation gives huge opportunities in terms of, doing that. Uh, Traffic management is another huge area basically. As you grow into cities, the ability to look at the footfall, the ability to look at the the usage of roads and other infrastructure, the ability to take that input to plan in terms of where the garden should be, where the expansion should be, where the new road should come in, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, the compliance in terms of traffic, in terms of automating the entire traffic violation, the generation, the ability to tie it to a vehicle or a person. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity around that. And as we talk about sustainability and other aspects, the ability to look at pollution as a, as one of the, you can look at pollution, you can look at carbon, emission. There are, you can look at water pollution. There are a lot of areas to look at. But if you look at pollution monitoring, that becomes a huge area from a compliance and sustainability perspective. Now, these are some of the examples that I could think of, and there could be many more. But at the end of the day, what is very, very important from your perspective is to look at a business challenge that you are going to solve, and that business challenge has to have a focus around a certain vertical. And the idea here is not to tell you about opportunities in smart cities, but to get into a mindset where you could think about a business challenge and then sort of detail it down in terms of where the lacuna is in terms of the current landscape and what opportunity that you have in terms of making that change. Similarly, I've articulated on the smart factory side of it. Again, all the factories are moving from industry, like there's a revolution. When hand moved to machine, machine moved to automation, and now the machines are becoming or factories are becoming smart. Factories are sort of becoming a one logical factory. And a factory is no more a single location where the complete end-to-end production is done. There are dependencies on supply chain, there are dependencies on producers. Within the factory, you have design team, you have team who are taking care of maintenance. Then there's a supply chain in terms of getting it to the warehousing kind of stuff, and from the warehousing, getting it to customers through different channels. And this farm to fork kind of approach is something which is basically transforming the way factories are there. And there's a revolution around Industry 4.0 or Industry 5.0, which sort of pretty much articulates that. I think some of the opportunities right now, since the industries or the factories have been around for long, they have humongous amount of data in terms of the machines that they use, the kind of production that they have, and just getting the right insight to the right people at the right point in time is a huge huge opportunity or a huge area of transformation in itself. We always talk about customer experience from the external customer. I think internal customer experience becomes very 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 important. So the ability to look at health and safety of your employees, to make sure that they are not exposed to anything which is dangerous. So, for example, if you are in a refrigeration plant, some of those plants actually have used some of the poisonous gas, as part of the production. Or there could be a lot of challenges in terms of the movement of the vehicles as well as the people, and the safety around that. That becomes another aspect. Condition-based maintenance, which is basically more coming out of the IoT needs, where you actually judge whether the machine needs maintenance or not, and things like that. And so there's a lot of plethora of opportunities around smart factories. And as I told earlier, the same can actually be extrapolated for different industries, so to speak. I hope guys this makes sense. Anything you want to add or anything you want to. Okay. So I think, let me move quickly on to the technology trends. I think it is very, very important that you keep an eye on where the technology is moving, because that gives you the context of where you are today, and how to move forward from there. So if I just look at, the trends that that at least I analyzed, a few months back, and what I see, what I basically see there is like, uh, gone are the days where you're looking at technology in silos. You're basically looking at into three different buckets. The first is the ability to build engineering trust, and where it comes from is the ability to sort of build a platform, the ability to sort of look at compliances, look at privacy of human being, looking at the whole manageability aspect of all the platform that you build. And when I talk about all that, and if you actually map that to all the startups, successful startups, all the FANG companies and their adoption of technology, you will see that in some form or shape, they have been basically adopting this model. And this engineering trust is the ability to sort of build and invest into platforms, into components, which actually forms the basis of getting trust from customers, the ability to sort of have manageability within the platform that you build, and the ability to build platforms which are sort of easy to build, have a good time to market advantage and things like that. And then the second part is sculpting changes, and what it means basically is this is where the amalgamation of business and technology happens. And so technologies and business will actually look at investing or building capabilities or building tools around AI, around automation, around decision intelligence, and ability to build applications at a very, very rapid pace. And the most important aspect is at the top part of it, which is sort of looking at how do you accelerate the business growth. And that basically comes from the ability to support distributed enterprises. COVID happened, and what the most important thing was the way we started to work also was very distributed, and that required support, in terms of how we can manage the total experience part of it. Look at metaverse, you look at AR, VR, you look at trying to basically figure out what the customer would need. Actually, that forms a part of total system. Autonomic system, we all know about, being autonomous, able to make your own decisions. And generative AI is something which solves one of the complex problems from an AI perspective. As you all know, AI pretty much is driven out of the data. It's a human-like behavior where you feed data, and based on that, you are able to do forecasting decisions and put in some inferences around that. Now, that was predominantly based on data, and there were concerns around the data being shared in terms of privacy and things like that. And generative AI is something that helps you to sort of at least ease that situation, because you're able to synthetically generate data, and that data can be used for your training. That data could be used to basically supplement or substitute that with the otherwise private or data which has some concerns and things like that. And also generative AI is sort of getting used in the media and ad industry, where if Shah Rukh Khan is actually giving an ad localized to Nagpur and talking about Nagpur as a city, or talking about your college while he's giving an advertising around around education. Now if he has to do that across India, it's actually going to take at least 1,000 to 10,000 kind of different videos that he has to speak. But with generative AI, the same Shah Rukh Khan actually speaks one, and you are able to generate multiple videos from there on, from that. And this is something that has started to happen. Uh, Predominantly the underlying enablers for all that is all the latest technology. You look at Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, the data part of it, where there's huge focus on the data engineering, data platform part of it, the artificial intelligence, which actually fits on the data that is there, the ability to use drone, to basically solve some of the challenges within a warehouse or within the last mile logistics part of it, the ability to automate, the ability to sort of get metaverse integrated as part of our life, the ability to look at Web 3.0, blockchain, and pretty much lot of these technologies which basically are emerging, are something which forms the basis of the basis of this trends. Uh, what I did was, from there I picked out the trends for AI and data, and hopefully, I don't have to go through all of them, but effectively, what I see is like AI feeds on data, but more and more AI and data have started to work together. And as young engineers, as someone who are interested in this area, I would be a strong proponent where if you're looking at a full stack definition around this area, then AI and data together is the full stack definition for me. Gone are the days where AI in itself will be sufficient, and gone are the days where data itself will be sufficient. We are basically using AI to look at data quality, to look at monitoring the pipelines, and similarly, without a quality data, and the AI is of no use. Now, there are multiple trends here. You could, few of them on the left hand side is one is about the vision analytics, and there are a lot of startups which are actually using vision analytics to sort of look at the mammogram, look at the input that comes in through low cost devices, and through that vision, their ability to sort of detect cancer ahead of time, with a minimal cost. There's a startup there working on that. And what vision analytics does is basically what human would otherwise do, use basically images. Videos to sort of detect things, and the detection could be in terms of product quality, it could be in terms of reading a document, it could be in terms of identifying some of the threats that you may have to your life in terms of your x-ray, your mammogram, and other things. And this is just the start of how technology will get adopted. There are a lot more things to happen. uh, Obviously, any startup that you look at, it focuses either on customer experience, in terms of we were always buying grocery, but now the way we buy grocery is very different, and that is where the customer experience comes into picture, because I don't have to step out of the house, I don't have to worry about the quality, and within a click I can do that. The second important aspect is around operational efficiency, and the operational efficiency obviously comes from the fact that all of us as humans want to do more, and the ability to do that comes basically aided by technology, and that becomes an important aspect around that. And the third thing is around innovation. How do you basically do innovation so that you could do things differently? And the likes of Ola, Uber, the likes of Oyo, basically, who don't own any asset, but they have innovated to sort of come out with different business models, to the extent that if you see a lot of social media company, like I see WhatsApp, giving me an option to actually pay while I'm looking at my WhatsApp message, because one of my friend has sent a QR code to make payment, or one of my friend has asked to make payment at a certain mobile number. And what WhatsApp does using AI is to figure out that there is a need, and then it ties that need to basically enable a fintech kind of experience where using UPI I can directly pay. Now, this ability to sort of innovate, where you are in a certain area in terms of social media, and then you are basically getting yourself enabled as a fintech company. I think that is awesome, and the pace at which it's happening is humongous. uh, the other important aspect is around decision intelligence. Now, obviously, AI is, I would still say, it started to sort of get adopted across organizations. Pretty much every startup that I look at today, has a is hugely influenced by the adoption of AI, and that's what basically brings in the legs and the muscles that it needs to sort of be ahead of competition. Now, obviously, AI is there to sort of help and augment human. The most important thing was at the initial stages, the AI was thought of as a black box. You give some input and give it output, and that becomes like a godly message to you. Now, explainable AI actually solves that problem by letting you know how the decision was done, what were the influences, and helps you to basically look at the authenticity of that decision. The other important aspect is on the composite AI part of it, and what it means, and what is very, very exciting to me is that 3 or 4 years back we were talking about AI as a machine, as only machine learning, where we'll say we'll need a lot of data scientists to sort of do that. I think in the last 2 to 3 years it has galloped very quickly. You have moved from machine learning to the ability to use auto ML, where you could choose automatically choose models, to the kind of techniques, AI techniques like vision and analytics, the likes of natural language processing, natural language generation, the ability to use graph analytics to do one-to-many kind of inferences, or ability to figure out those kind of relationship, to the advancement on the rule thing. So what happens effectively is, if you are trying to make a decision in an automated manner, you have a plethora of technologies and techniques around AI to choose from. And you have an option to sort of say, okay, for this part of my business, this technology works well. For this part of my business, this technology works well. And at the same time, you could have an ensemble of that to come out with a decision that to give. The ability of machine to work with data, the ability of machine to remember and have the resilience that you can never have from human. I think, and the scale at which the decision could be done is something that you guys got to look at. And this is something which is sort of across any idea or any startup that you would look at. I think there's a huge focus on decision intelligence. The other thing that has happened is as AI and data starts to work together, there is a huge requirement in terms of making sure that your operations are managed effectively. And when you have data and AI, the ability to manage those pipelines, the ability to make sure that they are doing the desired, they are giving the desired output. Very simplistically, if you're looking at some dashboards, the ability to look at data ops to make sure the authenticity of the data is there. If you're looking at AI and if you're looking at some inferencing, the ability to figure out drift, in terms of what was trained and what the new data is coming, the ability to sort of look at biases in an automated manner becomes very, very important. So it's not just about the development, it's also about operationalizing and managing and monitoring that. And the third important aspect from a manageability perspective is the ability to not only look at your data and AI in a siloed, but also look at the governance aspect of it. And what it actually means is that depending on which startup you are looking at, if you are looking at a at a startup which is basically helping to build smart cities, and you are actually looking at the camera feed to figure out how many vehicles and how many people are passing by, then the intent of the purpose of that particular application has to be understood, and whatever images you should capture should not have any identity in terms of people or the number plate in terms of any identifiable asset or mapping from there on. And that purpose becomes very, very important, and that becomes a part of the governance aspect of it. Now there are regulations coming in from different governments. Basically there's a GDPR requirement, then European Union has a regulation of its own. Now, without having a proper governance in place, you'll not be able to comply with that. And whether you are a startup, whether it's a large organization, I think it is very, very important that you have all these things in mind, from day one. So effectively, it's just not about engineering or using the AI for engineering. It's all about building intelligence on top of it. Trying to look at generative AI and data fabric. So these were the broader themes that came out in the last 6 to 8 months that actually I have been exposed to, and I thought it's important that you guys are aware of some of these trends as you start making decisions on your own. Folks, any inputs, any clarifications? I hope this is making sense to you folks. Okay, so I'll not spend much time on that. I think you all know about IoT, but I think it's important to understand how IoT has evolved. I think first and most important things is that IoT came up with this approach of connecting the unconnected. Everything that we had, right from our refrigerators to fridges to sort of smart glasses to my gaming consoles to my watches to my every device, everything that has to get connected. And I think that basically and what happened is that the last mile got extended. Earlier, the last mile definition was the connection that you have at your home, which connected your Wi-Fi and connecting your laptops, PCs, and devices. Now, billions of new devices got added, and most importantly, there are different kinds of devices, right? From the likes of cameras to the Fitbit kind of devices to Apple watches to your gaming consoles to your appliances, and you name it. And I think there's a huge different kind of devices that got connected. And what started to happen is there's a IT and OT convergence. IT we already know, it's basically about building software and using your laptop servers to sort of do transactional work. What OT means basically is more about the operational technology. And say, for example, in a factory, you had a foreman going and looking at the orientation of a machine, which will actually sort of give a sense of the failure that the machine may have, And if you actually put sensors on top of it, and if the sensor is able to take dead data and feed into your systems, then what was done manually could actually be automated, and then the human could actually do something more than that. Same thing goes if you look at a smart factory, and if you basically look at swipe cards, or if you look at smart variables, around that, and the ability to detect the position of your employee, and the ability to sort of zone them into critical, non-critical, accessible, non-accessible from a person perspective, and any violation there, or any hazardous thing, or any fall can be detected there, and that could be taken from a employee safety, perspective. Now, integrating all that together has become a huge value add from IT OT perspective. And obviously there are a lot of emerging standards. More importantly, everyone basically has come up with a kit, to be able, right from Apple to Google, to sort of connect multiple devices. There are a lot of different protocols as to how the machines and will basically interact with each other. And then there is a lot of protocols to communicate between your device, between your sensors, your edge, as well as the cloud. Now, obviously, this emergence has done multiple things. One is basically it has made everything around us intelligent, from the bottle to to the watch to our homes, and it has also basically created lot of data that comes in, and the ability to manage this data and the ability to have intelligence on top of that actually becomes an end-to-end connected fabric, and that's why there's a huge opportunity that we see. As we see, there are new business models. I think we already discussed some of the examples there, but what is also heartening to see is like the ability to sort of look at technology like low power van, where what happens is you've identified, you have your smart meters, you have your some of the watches that are there, or some of the specialized devices that are created within an industry. They don't need to send too much of data, and they have to be basically, they don't need to be charged very heavily at, very frequently. Now the ability to use low power protocols like Sigfox, LoRa, and now obviously NB-IoT, because it's an extension to the telco network that is there. The ability to define these new standards and use that for particular purpose, I think that speaks volume about the innovation and the business need that you see around this area. Uh, I'll extend the same thing to basic to AI, and effectively, what I see is AI till few years back was used in silos. So you actually used an application or built an application in silos, which actually did image recognition, and you could figure out whether this is a taxi, or this is a private vehicle, or now you can actually even look at whether this is a green vehicle, so to speak. Similarly, you could identify multiple things around damages and so on and so forth. But lot of those things were done in siloed, and if you look at any startup today, and if you look at any of the FANG companies, you would see that AI is no more used in silos. It basically is a foundation layer which is used across the entire organization. And when we talk about organization, you could actually divide it the way you want it. It could be around customer acquisition for your startup. It could be around the engineering team around the startup. It could be around or it could be the customer success team, which is actually working with the customer to make sure they are satisfied. Now, rather than these teams actually developing the software or AI software in silos, the ability to build AI fabric, build processes, so that every application actually is built on the top of this AI fabric becomes very, very important. And there could be multiple focus areas from an AI perspective, but I have just looked at customer, I've looked at your enterprise, and I've looked at IoT as one of the specialized use cases. And in each of them there could be multiple stuff. I think from a customer analytics perspective, Amazon has already taught us how to look at the next best action, like what the customer would like, how the customer preferences have to be basically sort of understood and given the choices that they would want. So you move away from a search to basically understanding the customer better. You look at the churn, the customer performance, the churn around customer. So a lot of focus on customer is there, and that's where the cognitive customer analytics comes into picture. The second important aspect is on how do you run your enterprises. So for example, if you are running a edutech startup, and you have limited hands in terms of talking to those students. Now, how do you use software to be able to figure out, how to reach out to customer to or your students to different channels, how to entice them? And when you have the data based on the information that you get from those students, how do you do your lead generation or propensity building, propensity models, so that you could actually identify a set of students who would actually who have more probability of converting into your customers. And this is one example. There are other examples where you use the likes of bots, where you use AI driven automation, so that your complete operation is AI enabled and hence requires less human human what do you call human labor, and at the same time you enable your minds to do much better than what they were doing earlier. Uh, IoT analytics, again, a huge space. Look at any asset that's there, right from the the telecom tower that is there, to the industries that are there, to the vehicles that are connected, to the home appliances that are connected, to the kind of care that is required for old age and geriatric and stuff like that. I think the ability to get data, the ability to analyze that, the ability to sort of use that for operational perspective from a from a predictive maintenance, or to basically derive value in terms of capacity planning or customer experience, becomes a huge part of that. Now, I think that is from the use case and what potentially you can do as part of your startup or organization. But the AI foundation is a very important aspect there, and what it actually means is the ability for you to look at a building a platform, and what it means is to look at data silos, getting it into a platform. And when I talk about AI foundation, don't look at it as a huge investment or a huge ask that you have to do before you start building your startup. It's more about a conceptual part of it. You have to keep in mind that as you start building more and more, and as your startup becomes more and more, mature, the foundation also parallelly has to become more and more mature. And data and feature engineering becomes very important aspect. The other important aspect is generally we deal with unstructured and structured data, and we think that inferring around that data is something that works out best for us. But there is some concept called feature engineering, and it basically gives you the feature you actually build a feature store. What it does is, based on the data that you have, you look at generating features. Some of the simple features could be from a health tech perspective. If you have height and weight, and you could actually create a BMI as a feature. Now around that feature you can do inferencing in terms of the kind of help people would need from lifestyle diseases, the kind of the kind of support they may need, or the kind of preventive healthcare packages that you can provide to them, and so on and so forth. Similarly, there could be a complex feature, like social determinant of health, and I think a social determinant of health, what it means basically, it looks at your lineage, it looks at the place that you stay, it looks at the environment that you, it looks at your social aspect, it looks at your history in terms of medicine and other things. So there are a lot of and humongous amount of things that are there, which basically comes in, and the ability to put a score around that, and based on that score, the ability to decide the kind of medical health help you'll require. From a planning perspective, if I have to open a hospital center, which are the location I should open up, so that there is a better operational efficiency and ROI for that. So there is a humongous amount of thing around that, and AI cataloging is around managing the AI assets to know the lineage, so that in the organization you know where your assets are from that perspective. So I think the feature engineering is an important aspect of this. Training, I think you guys, basically who's exposed to AI and machine learning will understand. Training, the need as the data is coming, the data is increasing, the training requirements also going, going high, and there is obviously infrastructure that is getting available by a lot of cloud companies in terms of multi-GPU and distributed company. Another only important aspect that I would want to highlight here is that while you train your model based on the data that is available, there's no guarantee that the same pattern of data will come in. So COVID came in, the user behavior changed, the prehistoric data and the kind of model that was used by the e-com company completely started to flop. That is the reason is because people move from their conscious buying to more of a value-based buying. The ability to judge that, the ability to sort of go back to the last known good state in case there's a new data that has come in or there's some bug that has come in, is actually aided by the model, the model DB. And deployment, I think Dockerized and the ability to scale, span, and get across multiple installation is one part of it. The monitoring aspect is a very important aspect. As I already mentioned, the ability to monitor your model if the new data comes in or there is a bias around that. The ability to sort of course correct that with a human human intervention is very important. And the way I look at it is more of a jugalbandi where you have the human helping the machine and the machine helping the human, and that human loop is very, very important to make both the machine better as well as based on the output that you get from the machine, the human is more empowered. And continuous AI is something where you have to look at AI as a platform which is delivering across different sections of different functions within your organization. You may have real-time requirements, you may have requirements which are semi-real time or non-real time. May have to be contextualized based on the business and the people who are consuming it. And the most important aspect is it is being trustable, because as you build your startups, as you build your organization around AI, the trust has to be there, and this has to be monitored, and you have to make sure that the data authenticity, the duplication of the data, the quality of data, the kind of tools you are using, the technologies that you are using, the biases that might unconsciously come into the system, the ability to eliminate that, map it to the features, the ability to not use those features as part of your inferencing becomes a huge and a very, very important aspect around that. Any I think there's one question on this. Let me How do I go back to chat? Just a sec. Okay, so I think there is a question which basically says for many data is available for training is not optimized for Indian use case. So I think I completely agree with you on that part. But at the same time, if you look at it, the vernacular language support has started to come in with the likes of Microsoft and other companies providing that, and there are some startups which actually are focusing in this area now. If you're looking at initiative around that, the first decision that you got to make is knowing that this data is a challenge. Are you going to build a startup which is going to solve the problem of getting this data build up, or are you looking at an application to be built around, say, you talked about tracking wildlife, or any other use case which looks at interacting or interaction on regional languages. Okay, so if you are looking at building application, you got to look at partnership around companies which are focusing on supporting the vernacular language more from an unstructured perspective. I think from structured perspective, everyone understand that, but there's a huge amount of work that got to be done from an unstructured like unstructured data perspective, where the NLP comes into picture. The other important aspect you got to remember is that the domain is very, very important. When you get to a travel site and when you basically type versus when you go to tracking a wildlife. I think the domain and the language and the lingo used there is also very, very important. So having domain expertise around that is also very, very is also very, very critical. The other thing is, you could actually look at generative AI to sort of see if you can generate, with some samples that you have, can you generate more content, around that. Now, I'm talking about NLG here, which is like natural language generation. And generative AI is right now more focused on images and videos, but I think the way the technology is progressing, you should be able to leverage something like NLG to make that happen. But in summary, you got to first look at whether you're looking at solving a business problem, or knowing that business has a problem around vernacular language, you're looking at solving the problem of making those languages available, or that platform available where vernacular language could be interpreted much better. Now, depending on that focus, or it could be a combination of both of them, depending on that, you'll have to basically put all the bows and arrows in that direction, and and trigger that. I hope I'm able to answer and contextualize the question here. Okay, so any other questions on this? So now let me come to the final part of it, isn't it? How do I like when I look at startup, how do I sort of bracket it out? I think the key question that I ask myself, is on the left hand side. First of all, any problem that I'm trying to solve, is it a big enough problem and is it a real problem? Okay, now a lot of times you try to solve a problem which might be technically very challenging. It could be something that that may give you all the high, and it may be a large problem, but then it's not something where you have the market ready for it. I'll give an example. If I remember in the late 90s, uh, IBM came with an operating system called OS2, and Windows came with DOS and Windows 95. And they were in a way competing with some bad blood between them. And uh, OS2 to me was way ahead of time. It was one of the very complex, very well thought through, and uh, a fantastic operating system, so to speak. And it had all security, all stability related issues taken care of. The biggest challenge was that this operating system were actually meant to be used by end user who had just started to use computer, and Microsoft got it right where they had a good user interface, so that it was easier for customers to use, and OS2 was more of a techie kind of operating system, given to the end user. And even though Windows had lot of bugs, blue screens, and so on and so forth, they got adopted more. And since they got adopted more, they basically had a early lead in terms of understanding the customer, understanding the bugs, and then rest is history in terms of who basically became a champion in operating system. And then obviously this has evolved into where operating system is no more the talk of the town. Everything that is on the top is what a consumer wants, kind of stuff. Okay. So the first thing is around identifying a problem, and to me it's one of the biggest thing to find the right market fit around that. Finding and identifying the problem which is real. That becomes the most important aspect from any startup perspective. The second thing is on the technology. Like obviously we are all coming from technology background, and today if you see, there's no startup or no organization which is not adopting technology. And if you look at the likes of McKinsey and all, they are very clearly articulating that in the next few years, the investment in technology is only going to increase. So you have to look at the innovator's dilemma advantage here. Can you have technology give you a huge advantage or a huge edge? Only if technology gives a huge edge, you basically have the muscle and the wheels to accelerate and beat the biggies. And if you look at the likes of Tesla, which basically is beating the earlier established companies. You look at the likes of Ola and Uber. You look at the likes of Netflix. They are heavily dependent on technology, and that gives them a huge edge against the incumbent. The third important aspect is, do you have the ecosystem and the team around that? And to that, I will basically also sort of augment the question that Jagriti asked. Sorry, what Aviral Verma basically asked in terms of funding. Now, obviously, you need a team and ecosystem around that, and funding becomes a very important aspect. For that. Now, your idea will be fungible only if someone believes in what you are planning to do, and the funding is a result of that. And obviously from time to time the funding process changes, the funding volume changes, and the expectations from the investor changes. In the late 90s there was an era where if you are come from a good college and you have a good PPT, people will fund, and then it tanked, and then things here also, if you are from IIT, if you're from a good college like yours, if you have a good idea, people will fund. Things have changed from there till now, where people want to figure out, have you invested your skin in that? Are you completely committed to that idea? Uh, do you have the right set of mentors? Do you have the right set of understanding around domain and other things around that? And do you have a minimal viable product that could be demonstrated and which has customer interest with you? Now, in most cases, you should have enough money and or enough support to be able to take up to that stage. Okay, and as you start becoming more and more valuable to the customer, the concepts become more and more sort of more and more profound. You have a better chance of getting funding, and then funding, obviously, if you're looking at a very early stage funding, pretty much it comes from your family or friend or circle who's basically known to you, and that is generally trust based. Okay, Then when you get into some advanced stage where you have started to grow some revenue or at least have business or customer traction, is where you have early stage investors coming in from the likes of incubators, coming in from the likes of Bombay Angel, and there are a lot of TIE, and there are a lot of organizations which facilitate that. And then as you start go to the next stage, you'll have the Series A, B, C, investors coming in with large organizations who have actually taken a lot of funds just to invest. And even those funds, you have to look at whether they are specific, they are focused on a particular domain, or they are focused on a technology driven approach, and at what stage do they invest. I know a few funds which only invest in the early stage, so they basically will invest only $1 million or $2 million. There are some funds which only invest large ticket items. So identifying basically what kind of funds would actually be more appropriate for you becomes very very important now. क्या करने हैं? वो कैसे करते हैं? मैं तो रुक जा। Purnash, you are not on mute. So that becomes very, very important. Now, money, also has a cost involved with it. So if you think getting money is the end from an organization, it is not. Actually, whenever you get money, you also take the responsibility of having an owner to whom you'll have to manage and justify. And also, because the money was given on certain targets and goals that you sold to the investors, you'll be held accountable for that. Okay, so you got to keep that that as well in mind. So you have to be true to yourself, you have to be true to the thought process and the plan that you have, and you have to be able to execute against those plans to be able to go to the next stage from a from a investment perspective. uh, I think there is no right or wrong way about whether you should be raising money or not. I think depending on your business model, depending on what is the route to profitability, and when I mean route to profitability, I basically I always believe that unless a business is there to be profitable, it's going to be tough for its valuation to be sustained. And I come from that school of thought. uh, and initial stages, obviously, the burnout of money is very very important, and you have multiple angles to look at it. And one is there might be like-minded folks, who are going to invest their time for equity, and they are not worried about looking at getting salaries and stuff like that. The ability to encourage and get those people to join you. Second thing is there are a lot of companies which actually have incentives for startups, in terms of cloud credit, in terms of being part of their cohorts, and they give you a lot of incentive not only to get free advice but also in terms of the platform and other credits that you get around that. Uh, then I see a lot of companies, and I know a few startups who are also working with triple I triple IT and Nagpur, where basically ability to leverage some of these bright students and and intelligence to sort of accelerate your initial part of the journey from startup, and this might excite those students and they may become a part of your journey. In terms of how to make a startup profitable, I think that will depend on the business model that you're looking at, and as I say, the business models are becoming far more complicated than what it was. For example, Zero, though it's in the fintech and in the share broking, thing, I don't think the kind of services that they provide and the kind of money they charge for services, it's not proportional. They make their money from the data that is available and the data that gets available. So they have clearly articulated how they are going to give how they are going to engage customer and onboard customer at volume, and how they are going to make money. uh, Similarly, a lot of other companies in the health tech space, the gestation period is very high. In the automotive space, the gestation is very high. So a lot of it is domain centric, like compliance required. So you have to chalk out based on the business idea. What is my earliest way of getting to profitability? And that is heavily dependent on the domain, the product that you're looking at, the kind of business that you have, whether it's a B2C business or a B2B2C kind of business. So looking at all those, you'll have to look at that. But one important aspect is whatever plan you chalk out, you start getting into the habit of reading the tea leaves. And what it means is basically ensure that you have a very close eye on the path to profitability, and basically keep fine tuning that all the time. I hope that makes sense to. The second question is actually is basically I think I answered both Aviral's and Jagriti's question. Any further clarifications on that? So now
And
if we look
so,
at, yeah, go
Vivek,
ahead, Ayush. Okay, so the trends I think we have already discussed. AI is moving to AI 2.0, and what it basically means is you're not looking at AI just for the narrow applications that are there. Basically getting used for for deep applications in the health tech, in the customer experience, in business model innovation, and things like that. So edge intelligence is another important aspect where the power of edge is far superior than what cloud had some point in time, and the need of doing decisions at that point in time within the premises at basically at a much lesser turnaround time becomes very very important. And our ability to develop implement things have become faster because of the low code no code kind of thing. And any platform that you look at today, any open source component that you look at it, I think you are having huge amount of frameworks and technology and tools available, which is pretty much like low code. And your ability to sort of build on top of that, is huge. Gone are the days where you have to do grounds up. So that's another thing that you got to keep in mind. Now, we looked at two domains. One is on the smart cities and other is on the smart factories. And what I did yesterday was just basically sort of put some opportunities around this. So if you look at a factory from a factory perspective, the factory has to run. Basically, the operational of the factory has to run, at a very very normalized rate, in the sense it has to have the raw material which basically is going to supply the product, which basically is going to meet what the customer needs. And forecasting becomes a very very important aspect around that. So there are opportunities where, if for a particular industry you could do accurate forecasting, and that could help that industry to sort of run optimally. That's one huge thing that I look at it. Supply chain optimization in terms of out of stock, in terms of managing the inventory. Let's say for example, you are looking at an organization which basically has around 100 crore just in the inventory. And what it means basically is the inventory that is there in the factory, inventory that's at the warehouse, inventory that is at the touch point where the customer will pick up. And any excess inventory that is kept actually is an investment that you have done, and it's a dead investment in terms of the cash lying there. Now, if you could optimally basically figure out the out of stock, optimally figure out how much has to be stored based on different geo, different channels, different stores, that supply chain optimization can actually sort of bring out lot of cash, and that cash then can be used for purposes to grow businesses. So that becomes another important aspect. Then modernization, I think very 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 important aspect from a smart city perspective as well as smart factory perspective, because there have been operations which have been running for ages together. There have been amount of information that is available in different formats. There have been tools that they have been using, which are basically sort of needs to be modernized. The ability to use AI, the ability to use a lot of automation around that, you use a huge modernization opportunity. And you could actually look at trying to sort of figuring out your piece around that. Edge intelligence, huge thing. I know of startups which are looking at just product quality. So what it actually means is that the output that comes from a factory, whether it's a car, whether it's a soap, whether it is basically a discrete industry or a product or a process industry, the output that comes in as the product quality starts percolating and basically goes up to the customer, the brand image of the company, the kind of investment that they need to sort of manage that becomes a huge issue. Identifying the product quality at the source becomes very very important. There are products that are built on the edge which are just doing that. They're able to find out the product quality in terms of color mismatches, in terms of the shape of the product, and so on and so forth. And not only that, that input can then be seeded into trying to find the lineage, whether the quality issue was because of a manual error, or was it because of a certain ingredient that came from a certain a certain supplier, and that helps you manage your business better, or it was a design flaw, so to speak. Okay, so then different stakeholders could actually take that and improve it in a much shorter cycle. Employee safety, I think we discussed about that. That becomes very important. Grid intelligence, again, from an energy perspective, but the same logic can be applied for water. From a energy perspective, I think there's a lot of issue with terms of leakages, in terms of failure, and any failure basically has a huge issue with regards to the the demand and the consumption and other aspects and all that. So there are startups which basically are looking at grid intelligence, looking at the power, parameters, and then the ability to predict failure. And in case there's a failure, the ability to detect the source of the failure and then guide the workforce to be able to come out of that, very quickly. Uh, Digital thread, I think, is a concept, but a huge opportunity I see, because as you see multiple functions within an organization, the ability to give the right information at the right time to the right stakeholder in the contextualized format, I think is a huge thing. There are a lot of companies which are startups which are looking at providing signals, like different events that could actually impact your organization's performance. So, for example, if there's a geopolitical situation, and if that signal has to be captured by your organization, it can actually be given to your manufacturing team, because they would know that there will be a delay in terms of supply, and that supply delay can basically help them to sort of replan their production thing. The same input can be given to the marketing team, so that if they are investing into basically marketing a product, and they expect because of the marketing the need will go high, they could actually sort of reschedule that, so that it's in align with the production that can happen. The same thing can be used by the sales guys to sort of identify that if you have so much product to sell, and the market is bigger than the product that you sell, you could actually figure out which are the customers, who will give you better ROI, and which are the customers which you want to satisfy with the kind of production that you do. And there are huge amount of things on compliance, where you could look at pollution management as a service. You could look at enabling and complying with certain standard, that as a service. And sustainability is something that is catching up, and I would request all of you guys to keep an no eye on that. Any clarifications, any inputs on this, guys? So coming to the final slide, and I think in summary, this is a slide which which is slightly dated, but I think it predominantly gives the kind of excitement that I look at. And if you look back, telephone has taken around one century to get adopted, and now telephone is a history, if you ask me, isn't it? Electricity has taken half a decade, refrigeration has taken 25 plus years, air conditioning has taken 20 plus years. So if you see from 1900, and if you come towards the 2000, there's a distinct trend that every new product that comes in has started to take lesser and lesser amount of time for it to become a household entity. Okay, on the right hand side, if you see, you'll see smartphone, which was not an entity in 2000. I remember getting my smartphone in 2000, but it was mighty expensive at that point in. No, sorry, it was not a smartphone. It was a mobile phone. The smartphone came in later. Within a few years, the smartphone has become a household entity. Everyone has a smartphone, and the amount of time it has taken is probably a decade or less. Now the next generation product that will come will actually is going to take far lesser amount of time to adopt and become a household entity compared to everything else. Now, what does it mean to us? I think what it means basically is, if someone has to invent Graham Bell has to invent a telephone, or someone has to, James Watt has to invent the engine, steam engine. They only had one life and one innovation to do. Okay. Now we, in our active life, we can afford to actually fail multiple times and still be basically innovating. Like innovation could have different connotation, but we have multiple chances to sort of innovate, because the whole adoption cycle has crunched into, say, for example, 5 to 7 years versus a century that was there a century back. And I think that's the most exciting part to me, in terms of I don't know how drones will shape up, but maybe in next 5 years, I may have a drone delivering medicine to me. I don't know how the you know how the digital life and physical life will sort of intersect with each other, but there's all probability why that few years down the line, while I'm talking to you folks, my avatar is here and my physical presence is somewhere else, and something else is happening at some point in time, and the amount of tutoring I have to do to my avatar to sort of speak here might be minimal. It might have all the data and my thought process to sort of go ahead and do that, and the same applies to you as folks. I don't know how robotics will basically play a huge role in the way things are manufactured and the things are managed today in the factories. And the list is, and there's a huge amount of potential and opportunities that are there. So I think this is the age to live in. I think we have a huge cushion with us, where even if we fail, we have a chance to succeed. Much better than what the previous generation had. There is a huge amount of people who basically appreciate innovation, appreciate entrepreneurship, and sort of are ready to be the early adopters for a lot of those. And overall, the ecosystem, even in this part of the world, has significantly improved, compared to what it was a while back, and it's only going northward, from here, right from basically the cost of investment to the cost of to basically the availability of mentorship to sort of having successful icons, who could actually guide and who are available to you. So I think this is the age to live in, and that is predominantly because of the pace at which the products and innovations are getting adopted. And I started with Paulo Cohen. I will end with him. Basically, I think it again boils down to your attitude, your belief, and if you really believe that something is going to change, the world, something is going to innovate, and something is going to basically, something that you believe in. I think you should go for it, and it's worth doing that. Success and failure is just a parameter which has a lot more factors to be considered, but just that experience of owning something, just the experience of believing in yourself is going to make you far better and far empowered in the future than what you are today. So with that, I'll basically want to conclude what I wanted to speak. Obviously, a lot of it was my thought process in terms of what I thought would be helping you. I'm more than happy to sort of take any questions, clarifications, or
Yeah, so Ajay, hi.
yeah, hey.
Sorry, like at the start beginning, I could not be there due to some emergency. There are many questions which could come out, but the first one I would like to start with. First of all, welcome on behalf of Triple IT, and happy to have you here. So, what would be your comment on failures which we always get in initial stages? They like philosophically they are the important milestones as far as this learning curve is concerned, but in general for innovation and the entrepreneurship followed by it, students are always deterrent because of fear of failures, and also already you have experienced this journey, and as a close friend of mine, I know you also have seen some failures, and also I think a comment on that or a guidance on that or a focus on that would help our students basically how to take failures and all.
Ashwin, that's a great question, and just to be on record, I have more failures than I have successes to count on. You know, the way I look at it is, failure is a failure, from a from a binary perspective, whether like it's generally counted as 0 and 1, and what you call a success and a failure is also dependent on the outcome that you're looking at. The outcome could be monetary, the outcome could be market validation or brand part of it, or it could be the kind of learnings that you have had which enables you to take the next step. Okay, so I was at a stage where I decided to go to startups when a lot of people were looking at the likes of Infosys and other companies, and the fact that my parents and my peer group never worried about the kind of company that I work with. They wanted to see me happy, and if I'm smiling, they're happy with me. And just to give you a background, guys, I don't come from a background where there was enough money. My father was with RBI Nagpur, and he put his own his entire life to get the kind of education and the base that we as his kids needed for us to. One thing is I had support from my near and dear whom I cared about in do what I wanted to do. And obviously, I did not know about inter. I was excited about who's the one who makes the decisions and why do they invest in the newer technology. And I went into startups. Now, when the failure happened, I just looked back and I figured out that I get a high by building something, by doing startups. And hence, basically, after the failure, rather than deterring and going back to a larger company, I sort of started a startup. And even if that startup after 10 years didn't give me the desired financial outcome, I was still happy because as part of the startup, I learned the value of ownership. I started to say basically it doesn't matter whether I have a sales function, marketing function, there is a office boy to clean the thing, there is a guy to fill the check, or the guy to talk to banks, the guy to look at technology, the guy to do architecture, the guy to do coding. I was the one who was actually sort of getting into all that. So right from implementation to architecture to customer to sort of getting the floor clean or cleaning the floor to making sure tea and coffee is arranged to sort of getting the website built up to sort of building up the ecosystem required for the company to prosper. So you do all that, and that kind of exposure you'll never get if you live in a walled environment. And even if they failed, they actually became the foundation stone for me to actually get success in the later years. And the way I had chalked out, Ashwin, is that even if my previous venture would have failed, I would have done one or two more because before I die, I just wanted to make sure that I succeed. And the last thing I wanted to do is to say, oh, Ashwin was successful with his startups because he was lucky. But then because I have tried it out, I know for sure that there's a huge amount of dedication, huge amount of thinking, huge amount of effort, and huge amount of intelligence required for you to succeed. Okay, and I'm better off with failing than better off being a lucky having a lucky success on day one. And by the way, I was not too far away of having that in my first startup where I could have actually financially retired with the kind of investment we got. But fortunately for me, it didn't happen, and I had to learn a lot of things the hard way. But I'm in a happy space right now, Ashwin, given the kind of experiences that I've had, especially with the failures.
Yeah, great. So I hope my students would be very happy knowing that, and they would definitely get some inspiration. Uh, I think there are few questions the host is getting in chat. I think so. So others can go ahead, please.
I request everyone, if there are any queries, kindly drop them in the chat box.
So by that time, again, Ajay from one of my faculty has asked the question like we as an institute or team, how can collaborate with you?
So there are a couple of things, Ashwin, here, isn't it? Like if some of the students have any clarifications, questions, to discuss on the business ideas, or in terms of how they should chalk out their career, I'll be more than happy to sort of, do that. Beyond that, I'm basically a charter member at TI. I actually sort of I'm on the advisory board of some startups as well, and I also sort of keep a keen eye on how innovation and technology is sort of moving around. So any guidance, any connects around that, I'm more than happy to do that. And At some point in time, hopefully, sooner than later, if I get into any startups, I'll surely want to leverage your students to sort of get a taste of entrepreneurship, around me.
Yeah, great knowing that. Um, Atish, you want to ask something?
Uh, yes, yes, sir. Sir, being the convener of IIC, I would like to thank you, Ajay sir, for spending a valuable time with us. And it's a great pleasure. And I would like to thank you again for accepting our invitation. And we had granted incubation center from MSME department, and we are in the starting phase. So in future also we might require your support and guidance. So, and we will identify the opportunity to call you personally, physically in the campus within within now, and hope we will be in touch with you for the guidance. So thank you very much, sir.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Tish, always available for startups and young minds. I feel good to be basically part of this kind of environment. It basically gets me back to my early and vulnerable days, so to speak, where I used to get worried about technology, about business, about day-to-day life. And when I'm very, very happy to contribute in whatever form and shape I can do, to your organization. And a big thanks to you, Ashwin and Paritosh for getting me here. I think it's as much as a learning for me as as I could talk about my experience, and hopefully they are sort of relevant to you folks.
Thank you, sir.
Before we formally conclude, Ajay, again one very good question from one of my faculties there. Overall with this experience, what do you suggest that which one or two courses or contents or skill-based this thing should be included in the curriculum, or where do you find that which we as student might have missed it, but in current arena you think that if it is not there, it must be included in the curriculum. May not be the only engineering technical subject or content, whatever it is there, but one of two subjects or topics or hands-on skills or whatever it is there. What would you suggest that you think that that should be a very necessary component of the overall curriculum? And
That's a great no, question, Ashwin, and good to see that you guys are sort of looking at modulating and adopting newer things around that. So the way I look at it is, on the technology front per se, I see uh, accelerated adoption by the student. You name a technology, and I will see students basically looking at that, whether it's robotics, whether it's metaverse, whether it's Web 3.0, the AIs and the IoT. I see lot of resonance and lot of adoption around that, either coming from the faculty or the way the content is democratized today. I think content is available and just a matter of intent in doing that. What I find is an area where we should all work towards is to sort of strengthen our business understanding. And what it basically means is that try to figure out which are the domains or verticals that appeals to you. It could be health tech, it could be edutech, it could be focus on like horizontals, focus like sustainability and stuff like that. I think develop interest into some of those vertical or horizontal areas, from an interest perspective, and get deeper into that in terms of why sustainability is more important today. Why is that getting discussed at WTO? What is the implication it has on the health and the health and the the basically the strength of a nation, so to speak, or strength of a area, so to speak. Now, if you get more and more interested into that, you will basically be able to understand the challenges and hence able to understand the opportunities that you get around that. Okay. Now, armed with that information, you could use technology as a tool to enable that. And believe me, today we talk about AI, we talk about this, we talk about that. Tomorrow, in 3 years' time, as I showed in my thing, the way that which the no, products are getting adopted, same way the technology landscape will keep on changing. And you look at how fast the data landscape has changed, and how fast and faster than that the AI landscape has changed. Okay, and 2 years from now we'll be talking about few more technologies and few more tools which will actually be able to enable you doing that. Now, when the discussion is about entrepreneurship, when the discussion is about startup, I think it has to be starting with your passion towards a problem. It could come from a personal experience, it could come from your ability to identify the lacuna, and it has to have a very, very strong business connotation to it. And I think that awareness is very, very important, because at the end of the day, the far-reaching impact, the market fit for your product will all come from that perspective. Just can't be a technology platform. And just to make a case in point, if I am an engineer and if I am asked to build a social media platform, actually I will build the same technology stack and give it to Facebook and give it to LinkedIn and say, okay, I'm building both Facebook and LinkedIn. But it doesn't work like that. Facebook is Facebook. It has a kind of customer base doing certain activities. LinkedIn business model is different. Their revenue models are different, and their target customers are different. But if you look at that underlying stack, I think if it's an engineer to engineer discussion, you'll figure out that the stack pretty much is the same. But the business problem, the business model, business challenges, and the customer base is very, very different for Facebook to LinkedIn kind of stuff. Similarly, it goes for lot of adjacent products and customers and domains that are that are there. So in summary, look at strengthening the one of strengthening your knowledge around horizontal or verticals like domains, which is of interest to you. And today, pretty much every domain and uh, every area needs technology.
Yeah, as this session was purely for students, there are many questions or volley of questions, but out of that three I have found, I am reading three altogether at the same time. There is slight overlap also for you. In that case, the first question is, sir, what challenges you faced during initial stages and how you tackled them? This is the first. And the other two are quite similar, sir. If we have an idea, then how to validate its potential to work as a startup? And sir, how did you finalize an idea to go ahead among a lot of ideas, thoughts which might be flooding your mind at that time? How did you manage the fear of tackling such high risks?
I'm lost, so let me take one at a time. Let me take
Yeah,
the third one. Okay. So
yeah,
basically, how do you originate an idea, and how do you basically tackle the fear of tackle the fear there, and how do you choose from multiple ideas? I think first thing first, I will not start any startup or any initiative till the time I have jotted down what problem I want to solve and how I want to solve, at least in the foreseeable future. Because I don't want to be, I actually say power of belief, you should believe in that, but I don't want to start saying I have two options to go left and go right. I want to go with basically a very clear understanding of what I want to solve, which area, what problem statement, and how I want to solve. That's number one. And if that process takes years together, I'm ready to invest those years, because I'm more of a warrior who goes forward, the door gets closed, you either die or you basically kill someone and come out. Again, I'm using this term from Troy, but that's how it is. So you have to have the absolute clarity when you start. Okay, that is number one. It doesn't mean that you are actually going to live and die with that product. It just means that you have to know what idea, what you have to start. So that is one. Then fear of tackling. I think if you believe in something and if you are determined to make it happen, you will also change paths as and when required, and those path changes will happen based on a conscious decision or a choice, based on the discussions that you have with your mentors, based on the discussion you have with industry leaders, based on what you observe, and based on what you see. And I think that has been the case with most of the startups. Even if you see Flipkart, they started with books, and now they do everything else along with that, and same has been with Amazon. Sometimes you get inspired by some company in the geography, like for example, Square did something to fintech market, which allowed basically the vendors to be able to take, at a low cost, to be able to take credit card and other payments. That same concept is there in EasyTap in India. Sometimes it could be a mapping from that perspective. Sometimes it could be a very, very novel idea, on a health tech side where you're looking at cardiogram or you're looking at mammogram for breast cancer at a certain age to be able to democratize that. It could be driven out of social, it could be driven out of your experiences, could be driven out of opportunity that is there. But you have to choose one problem and then go ahead. And if that has to change as we go along, so be it. But one thing at a time is what you got to look at it, because people who are working around you also want you to be strong. They also want you to be clear in your thought. People may agree or disagree, but at least they want you to see as a leader who knows what he's doing, he or she is doing. Ashwin, I hope that makes sense, and if you don't mind, can you repeat the previous question?
Yeah, the one which is left is how you have tackled the initial challenges which were there once you start.
So there are multiple challenges. The challenges are on the, are on the personal front. The challenges are on the professional front. The challenges are on managing yourself in terms of your expectations. Uh, I think startup is a glamorous stuff, isn't it? And it is getting more and more glamorous as we speak. I firmly believe that whatever you do, either being part of an education institute and the kind of service that you guys are doing, or you are in a job and doing certain things, or you are part of a startup, or you're doing your own business. I think, irrespective of what you do, I think that entrepreneurship is all about your attitude, ability to take ownership, the attitude that you have to basically get into unknown territories, the kind of belief system that you build. I think that is something that you have to have within yourself, and that is independent of whether you have a startup tag or don't have a startup tag. I think that becomes an essential ingredient. uh, from a personal perspective, it's slightly easier because finally, once you take a decision, isn't it, it's, you are the lawyer and you are the judge. So basically, you can easily navigate through that and sleep peacefully, and I have slept peacefully throughout my life, irrespective of successes and failures that I have seen. Now, coming back to the family part of it, isn't it? So what I have consciously done is, my family is not worried about anything else, but they're worried about me. So if I come home, if I'm smiling, if I am the way I behaved yesterday, then they feel everything is all fine. Then whether you keep a pile of a bundle of, bundle of paper and call it notes, or you really have notes, it doesn't matter to family. So don't try to get your pressures and your challenges onto the family, where family basically has to be family. At the same time, you have to be transparent. I'm not saying be opaque, but have to be transparent. So you got to manage that part of it. The other thing is, I have realized that if there's a failure, you have to take it on your chin. If there is a mistake that you have done, take it on your chin, and that becomes life becomes very, very simple, because then everyone comes and talks to you and everyone understands, and there might be disagreement, but let's agree to disagree is how I will close lot of these things. Now, having said that, because I have had successes, I don't want to come across as a Herculean guy who has not got fears. I think fears and, greed are, I think, two emotions that all of us should have, because they help us to do better, they help us to run faster. So if I'm fearful that my company will go down tomorrow, I'll run that much faster to see what are the alternate avenues for me to sort of succeed. And in spite of that, if I fail, at least I know that I have tried everything possible within my prowess to make it happen, and it still didn't happen. Tomorrow I may learn one more thing, next time I will try that as well. Okay, but the fact that I have tried whatever I could and I have done whatever I could, I think it's something that gives me a lot of satisfaction in terms of doing that. So what I'm saying is, don't do a startup just because it's glamorous. Do whatever you're doing, make sure that's, that gives you all the fun, and make sure, because you are happy doing what you're doing, you'll do what best you could do, and your environment around that will also be having a huge impact, or huge positive impact, with that.
Sir, I would like to ask, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible, please go ahead.
Yeah. Uh, So sometimes students come to us and ask कि they have idea, they can design, they can develop the website, they can design the app, they can develop the app for a single idea, and they think that they can establish the startup around that idea. So how we should guide them in this case?
So what I would suggest is, obviously everyone's baby is, is dear to them, So when I came up with few ideas, I always thought that these ideas are actually going to be wonder, going to do great. The first thing is, the proof is in the pudding. So you have to try it out. The trying and seeing what works, what doesn't work becomes very, very important. And from a student perspective, I think the first thing should happen is to give opportunity to them to try it out. So if they want to build an app, they want to build build a website, give them opportunities within your institute, within basically the community, within near Nagpur or around industries around Nagpur, for them to sort of understand that and make it happen. Then once you basically cross that bridge is where you have to look at help coming